Welcome to Wedding Photography Weekly, the weekly question and answer show where I answer your questions. Welcome to this week's show. We have a lot of questions. If you're interested in submitting a question, you have to be a member of our member site, and then you can head over to our Facebook group and join the members only Facebook group. You can submit any questions you want. Every week I'll post a topic and you can ask anything. First question. Sean Howard says, you've mentioned before that you run your wedding photos through Photoshop after editing to do sharpening. Could you explain the process and how you manage to load all your wedding photos into PS? So what I do is I batch process everything. What I do is I actually only do portraiture, which essentially is AI skin softening. So I run it through that, and then I bring that down to about 60%, and then I squeeze the frame from 100% down to 98%, so everybody loses a couple of pounds, and they seem to be happy about that, but it ruins your aspect ratio a little bit. So that's all I do. I do it once, I record the action, and then I go into file, wherever it is, it's in batch processing, and then you just point that action at the folder, and it just goes through all the images and loads them individually. Now it's very, very quick, so I would say to batch 700 images, maybe 20 minutes. It used to take a lot longer, it used to take a couple hours, but things seem to be going a little bit faster, so happy about that. But that's my process for that. I don't sharpen, I don't do anything beyond that. It's really just for the skin smoothing and just, I guess, also kind of the dimensions of the entire file that I change. Next question, Keith says, are you currently investing in your business still, lighting, cameras, other equipment? So I would say a bit of, I do, obviously I'm here on YouTube, so I do a lot of YouTube things. So I buy a lot of unnecessary gear and lenses in order to either test them or bring potentially purchasing decisions to you all. As far as like, I'm for sure testing and purchasing more equipment than is necessary by a traditional studio. I would say, if I was just a photographer and I was only doing photography, I would be very happy with my Nikon D810. I would probably have a D850 by this point just because it's a great experience. But I would say that like I'd be very happy with all of those cameras if I was just doing photography only. There's really not a whole lot of reason to upgrade. If I was going mirrorless, I would likely be looking at the Z5 as well as potentially the new 1.2 that I guess, according to Nikon rumors, might be announced this week. I would say that something like that would just be my perfect kit, that I wouldn't really need anything beyond that. But because I do YouTube videos, I buy a lot of things and I require this Canon R because it has a front-facing screen, or the R6 rather. So I need some things that are outside of the bounds of what my actual photography business needs. As far as what I would be investing in, I would be making sure that my cameras didn't get too exceptionally far beyond what their shutter is rated for. But other than that, I think that I'd be pretty happy that like the files I was delivering 5 years ago, super happy with them still. No problem at all shooting that kind of same setup as I'd be going now. What percentage, or what would be the percentage breakdown of how you run your finances? X amount for expenses, X amount for profit, and so forth. So it's been, I would say that wedding photography, fortunately, is a very profit-rich environment, that it is a lot of profit for commercial work. I'll run the numbers a little bit more, especially if I'm hiring someone to do After Effects, or I need to hire in staff for locations or whatever it might be. I run those numbers a little bit harder. For my actual wedding photography business, it's pretty minimal as far as, fortunately, I guess, as far as our needs go. Like, for instance, if I wanted to start a bakery, I'm probably looking at a $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 investment before I can even open the doors. And at that point, I've opened this bakery, and now I'm incrementally in the bakery scenario. I'm literally selling loaves of bread. So I'm making back small profits over time, and you have to run that business a lot more based on numbers, I think. For wedding photography, the thing that kind of scales it, I guess, that changes everything is that, for instance, wedding photography, if you say you're going to book 30 weddings this year, there's really not a whole lot that you can do to hit that goal specifically. You can try, you can market, you can advertise up until you hit that, but there is really not a whole lot of control within that. So I have found my happiness in, one, marketing towards that, and also understanding that that might just not come true, and finding other ways to make money within that, and to have other things that I can lean into over the winter to hopefully make some money. And then as far as weddings go, if you're looking at just being primarily a wedding photographer, by booking 2 more weddings in a year, you're significantly exceeding, like, for instance, outsourcing. I have a company that outsources for me. I'm going to say if I book 1 additional wedding, that pretty much covers the entire cost of them outsourcing and editing all of my wedding images for the entire year. So I feel like the numbers are really in our favor as wedding photographers. So I don't focus too hard on the exact expenses versus profit. And then also, I guess, like monthly running expenses are very, very small. We have a studio, but that is a completely unnecessary expense. We don't need to have a studio. The story there is basically we got it because it was available and it was at a ridiculously low price. And for that price, I thought that it was a good idea to have my logo up on the busiest intersection in our city. We don't need that. That's an unnecessary expense. It comes with the unnecessary expense of internet and everything in hydro and that goes along with that, but it's not necessary. All the cameras that I buy, also not 100% necessary. I need this R6, again, front-facing screen, but not something that I would have purchased otherwise. If I was just doing photography or if I was doing video at this point, I'd likely just be looking at the Canon or the Nikon Z5. It does everything that I need, and with the exception of the front-facing screen and the video autofocus that I do require as somebody that does other things as well. Kenny says, have you listened to Toby? I can't pronounce the last name. I think you dig him. I have not, but I will definitely check him out. Siobhan says, going off Keith's post, do you have a breakdown of what you need to invest outside of gear to set up a new business? Again, I think it's pretty minimal as far as what we need. I have my biggest recurring expense, either fortunately or unfortunately, is the Adobe suite, but I need all of the programs, so it's very expensive. If you just want photography, if you just want Lightroom and Photoshop, it's very inexpensive. As soon as you add Premiere, it gets a little bit more expensive. I would say, quite honestly, that is my biggest operating expense from, at least in my regular photography business. Obviously studio a little bit more expensive, but I don't really have a huge, like a list of kind of everything that you'd exactly need. I do a Squarespace website that recurs, or the payment records every single year. Advertising is very season to taste. If I have money, if I have budget for it, I'm happy to do it. Or if I see an opportunity as well. Or in other cases, if I don't have the money and I see an opportunity, I kind of just like wait until work comes in off of that ad to put more money back into the ad. I think that's kind of the way that I've run my business, is kind of a very lean startup overall, I think. But yeah, fortunately not a whole lot of expenses for us. People says, forgive the noob question, but when shooting manual at an event like a wedding, where things are relatively fast paced, how do you know where to set the shutter, aperture, ISO, especially when moving from different rooms? I think it just comes with experience. And then also knowing that, so the reason that I shoot manual is simply because it helps me speed up my post-production time. It's not something, especially now, that's 100% required. It used to be that cameras would meter and they would just give you weird files and they didn't really know how to interpret scenes. I would say now most cameras are pretty good when you walk into an environment. So shooting aperture priority or leaving it on auto ISO and then capping that ISO at whatever you're comfortable with, I think is totally fine. If you're shooting mirrorless, shooting manual becomes very, very easy. If you're still on digital SLR, looking through the optical viewfinder, you can't really 100% see, I guess, like the image you're taking. Mirrorless, like very, very easy to just, I don't know, see exactly what you're doing. Much easier to shoot manual, I would say. But just by experience and knowing when you're walking into a place, I pretty much leave my aperture wide open all day, or pretty close to wide open. So that's kind of one variable that I don't have to move. And then I don't want my shutter to go really beyond, I would say anything below like 1/60th of a second, I'm not super comfortable with. 1/100th of a second if I'm photographing people. So if I hit that, that's when my ISO starts to come up. So it's kind of just that my shutter speed gets nice and low, and then as soon as it hits that kind of bottom point, at that point I start bringing my my ISO up. But also you can set that in your camera as far as auto ISO, that you can set your minimum shutter speed, and then at that point it'll just do it automatically for you. But you might have some more adjustments to do in post-production. But again, if you're just kind of getting started and learning, that's kind of part of the learning process, and it'll help you get slightly better files without struggling too hard on the day. Andrew says, curious to see what a full online gallery would look like typically that I typically deliver. Do you organize images in a particular way? There was one on Patreon, so I can bring that over to the new site. I guess the way that I do everything is there's two ways to go about it. One, you can do a highlight section where it's kind of essentially what would end up in a wedding album. I deliver through Pixieset, so it's very easy to set up a sub gallery and add images to it, and then have the main gallery of absolutely everything. I find that if I'm doing photo video coverage, the file count is a somewhat manageable number to put into one single gallery. So I'm talking like maybe 500 to 700 images. I think that's totally fine for one single gallery. If you're doing a multi-day event that has a Thursday night, a Friday night, a Saturday, and like a Sunday brunch, at that point I'd start to separate things out. But I would leave them daily unless you really have a reason to go beyond that. I don't think that you need to separate it by getting ready and like family photos and all of that. I feel like to leave it as one cohesive thing, I kind of like. So that's what I would do. But I will port over a full gallery. There was one definitely on Patreon. Nikki says, pixel peeping, do you do it mainly to check focus as you shoot wide open? So I typically, I have a level of trust with most of my lenses now, and I know when I don't trust those lenses. The older Nikon 7200 was one of those lenses that I just didn't 100% trust. So I was always, I basically have the center button on my little D-pad set to 100% focus check on the focus point. So I would do that from every time to time, like when I'm reviewing an image, just do a quick little check to make sure that the face I thought was in focus. But after years of using the same lenses, I became pretty happy with them. Now that I'm shooting Canon R6 kind of as my main camera body temporarily until I see what Nikon's next move is, I have 100% trust in this system. I can see that the eye auto detect is just picking somebody up at an unreasonable distance, that it knows exactly who I need to be focusing on. And seeing all of that through the EVF, I'm pretty comfortable with that. I would say maybe every now and then I'll have a full 100% focus check, but I'm not too focused on it now, fortunately, shooting this. But with some lenses that I was not super familiar with, or if it was my first time using that lens at a wedding, I would be checking that. And again, center button's the easiest way to do that. Sam says, how do you keep track of business expenses and income in regards to filing taxes and making it easy when tax season comes? Realize you're in Canada and it may be different here versus the States. So I have a monthly bookkeeper, I suppose. Monthly bookkeeper, and then I have a tax company that does all my actual expenses and everything. That's, I guess, maybe the way that, again, keeps me the happiest. I'm a big advocate of outsourcing. I didn't really want to bring, I'm not an accountant by trade, so I didn't want to bring all of that in-house and try to do it. So I do, I guess, the easy stuff, which is just like tracking and categorizing things. That if I buy a camera, it goes in this pile. If I buy something for the office, it goes in this pile. But overall, I don't get too deep into that, and that is fully by design because it's not. I feel like there's hundreds of hours of work that you can potentially do if you go down that road. So I would say, especially this becomes legally required. I think if you're an incorporation, at least here in Canada, that you have to have somebody working with you for that. So maybe. If that is your plan to eventually go incorporated, I would say when you do that incorporation, if it does make sense for you to get some help at that point, I feel like that's the right time to do it. There's also fractional CFOs. A few of our friends here, basically they run their CFO for a number of different startups around town. So rather than just working at one place all the time, that if it's a company of 6 people, he's not needed there every single day, so he'll work at a number of different locations. So if you can find somebody like that, also very helpful. And just in terms of advice for purchasing decisions, to have somebody you can just like quickly text message that they're not going to charge you for a full hour of work. If it's a simple question, obviously don't just keep hitting them with simple questions every single day, or they're going to become quite annoyed with you. But it's very nice to have, and it's very nice to have somebody that understands tax on a level that I do not, and understands how to do things when maybe I would not even believe that they would be a business expense, that there is at least pieces of that could be a business expense. So yeah, that's my advice for that. Richard says, I know you mentioned that you shoot in Kelvin white balance, so the whole day has a consistent look. Do you adjust based on lighting conditions? So I'm primarily, I would say, in either, I haven't decided yet on Canon. I've been shooting the Canon on auto white balance a lot, but usually on my Nikon equipment, I was always on shade, either the cloud or the actual house mode. And I found that it looks a little too warm on Canon, so I haven't 100% figured that out. I could go back to Kelvin, I suppose, but at least kind of in these, I'm just doing like micro weddings and elopements, that it's okay if I don't shoot it as well as I would like to in camera. I would say by just having your camera set to shade or cloud mode when you're out in the shade, again, even if you are in the sun, there's a pretty good chance that the person that you're photographing, their face is in the shade. So white balancing for skin tone and not overall scene. I don't care if the overall scene maybe looks a little bit weird as long as the people look good. So I do that pretty much until I find myself in an environment that I need to change. And usually that's like just as blue hour starts to kick in, that I need to change to incandescent or fluorescent depending on the lights that are in the room. But that's kind of how I do that. And then as far as editing goes, even if my files do come off camera a little bit too hot, the white balance is a little bit too warm, I have presets, and I guess you're a member, so you got access to all those presets that come in with some cooler tones. So like Summer 2019 Cool or 2018 Cool is basically designed that if you're shooting a little bit too warm maybe, and you hit that it still leaves the overall feeling of the warmth there, but cools it down just a little bit, so it doesn't look too warm. So that's kind of how I kind of went about that. But yeah, I would say that right now, auto white balance, as weird as that is, but I am doing batch corrections on just white balance. So if I'm in a certain scene, just grab all those images and quickly do a white balance sync on them once I've found the correct one. But I would say that the Canon, like the R6, is pretty good, and surprisingly good, I would say, as far as picking just like nice feeling white balances overall. Wes says, how do you plan your schedule for YouTube ideas? What's your method to writing, creating content ideas, and then posting? So my workflow is to keep it as linear as possible, I think. That I really do want to make it as simple on myself. If I make it too complex and too difficult, I don't ever finish anything. So by just coming up with an idea, and usually how it works is I'll put it on my calendar for a random day next week, and I want to make sure that I have a random idea on every single day. And sometimes I'll go into the studio over the weekend and just record all of them and have them all ready to go. And then I'll schedule them out throughout different times, just so it's not just a whole bunch of just me sitting at a desk talking, wearing the same shirt over a week or two. So I schedule them out over different times usually. And then as far as bigger pieces of content go, it sometimes depends if I'm working with a brand. There's sometimes they need like lots of lead time sometimes, or if I'm actually working with them to do a video, or for instance with the Nikon show that we shot a lot of that in November and January, and we didn't really have that out until March. So that was a weird workflow anomaly that usually doesn't exist. But usually we go out, we shoot something, and within a week I'll edit and have that out. Now Marshall's editing some stuff for me, and Tim's always been editing a few things for me. So it's nice to have like a little small support network. But I find with video, with YouTube video specifically, that it's been very hard for me to outsource to anyone, just because one, speed of turnaround, and then two, that we never really know what the final product looks like, and we're just kind of doing the best we can usually within whatever we end up capturing. So it's always a bit of an adventurous process, I guess. But yeah, just like keeping self-motivated and just keep doing stuff. And sometimes like you get some positive reinforcement through people watching it and commenting that it's helpful, and then sometimes nobody really watches it, or if they do, it doesn't seem to affect them in any way, and you know to maybe that's not worth your time and spending your time on that. Cody has a few questions. I believe you use drones sometimes for opening shots. How much extra would you charge, and would you specifically advertise that you have a drone on your website? You're in Canada, so if you're legally allowed to operate a drone, maybe advertise that. If you're not legally allowed to operate a drone, maybe keep it quiet. What do I use now? I use the Mavic Mini. So it's like super tiny and quite inexpensive. I only use it for, like, I shoot, again, HD, regular HD. So it's pretty easy to set that up, get it to do a few shots. I do my best not to make any drone shots really look like drone shots. It's always been kind of my mantra to hide them as best as possible. So that means that maybe like sometimes I'm over a pond, but I'm never doing like the full just like sweep in over the pond and make it look as crazy and cinematic as possible. It's more so just like little small adjustments in spaces that I couldn't actually get into, which also means I'm not usually too high in the air, that I'm usually around maybe double my height. Tim actually in the video that I posted last week, he kind of, I guess, mentioned that it's almost as though you have a GoPro on a stick, on like a long pole, and wherever you can kind of put that, whatever moves you can do with that is kind of what I do with the drone. Legally, I feel like that's also kind of, at least you're trying to abide by guidelines, that you're not trying to like just go crazy. So there's a lot of, I guess, legal that goes into all that, but that's what I use for my drone shots, but I don't use them for too many shots throughout the day. For starting wedding photographers, would you run giveaways to try to increase popularity, followers for social media? Is one every month way too much? I would say see how how well they go over. If you do a giveaway and it gets a really, really great response and you get a good email list started with multiple different giveaways, by all means kind of keep doing them if they're responding well. I would change them up so you're not always doing the same giveaway, that maybe this week or this month you're gonna do a family session, next month you're gonna do an engagement session, next month you're gonna do like winter downtown Toronto, whatever it might be. To always come up with something that's a little bit different, and that will also spark people's brains to be like, oh, I would like to do that. Even if I don't win, I'm still gonna pay you some money. That would kind of be how I would go around it. Do you have an optimal time for how long you run ads, or something that you run all year long? It all depends on, I would say, the only time that I for sure run ads is usually January, February. Most January, February, I will be running ads that entire length of period. But throughout the rest of the year, it really kind of depends on, I guess if I see a lot of inquiries come in, then I will maybe put a few dollars into an ad and see if that generates more. I'm very much in the mindset of, I don't try to drum up business whenever nothing in the market seems to be happening, that I just kind of accept that maybe this is just not the time. But when things do seem to pick up just for no reason, like in September for some reason, that I just start putting a few more dollars into that to hopefully get a few more leads within that. But I'm not running detailed analytics on like cost per lead or anything like that. It's very much like, hey, like if you'd like to hopefully maybe talk to me, here's the thing. And if you do generate one booking from that, it easily covers it and pays for it. And then the other bonus is that even if you don't specifically generate a new lead from that, you're still doing kind of that ongoing branding where people are seeing your name again, and if they see your name a bunch of times, they're going to have more trust with you. So that's another thing that I guess I do. Number 4, how important is Facebook Pixel to help track ad analytics? Facebook Pixel, you can just retarget basically. So I think it's nice to have. But at the end of the day, if somebody comes to my website and they bounce away, I don't really need to remarket to them too much. It's through Google Analytics, you can see how people go through your website. I'm not sure if through Facebook Pixel you can as well, but I would find that the Google Analytics side that you can actually see how people go through your site is much more important to me than just knowing that somebody's been on my site and being able to remarket to them. So yeah, Google Analytics I think is better overall for that. I'll get through the rest of these 5. Shutter rings during ring exchange, though walking all the way up, find it hard to even get with the 7200. I would go into crop mode within your camera, get all the way to 200, go into crop mode, and then just get as close as you can. Ring shots always suck because they always try to put them in the wrong spot, or they hide with hands or whatever it might be. 6, would you post other content besides weddings still related to the creativity industry on a blog, website, or keep it strictly wedding related? I'm fine to post whatever I kind of decide would fit my brand on my blog. If you're not doing any weddings right now, it might be nice to have something to kind of supplement that, but don't make it all just not wedding content overall. 7, I've been getting on and off results with ads. Is there any way to check which part of the ad I need to work on? Landing page. Google Analytics should be able to tell you how to, or at least where people are coming to your website and where they bounce or if they bounce, rather than going to the contact form. So I would kind of track through that. 8, how do you deal with the cost of ads when starting out, especially trying to figure out what kind of ads and don't work? Worried, nervous, money throwing away, not getting results back. I would typically just see what has a good relevance score in your Facebook ad manager. If it's a 7, an 8, and 9, that means people are engaging with it. If it's a 1, 2, 3, 4, get rid of that ad, I would say overall. But good relevance means that people are responding to it when it's shown to them. So I would just make sure that that's nice and high, and then keep modifying ads based on what seems to be working. 9, do you know if there's any advantages getting Godox V1 compared to the older flashes? I would say the V1, in my experience, refreshes a lot faster, and I think it works equally the same as far as an off-camera flash, but I would say refresh, power, and then just as a main light, I would say that it's great. But if it's one of the old flashes that have the lithium ion battery and it's nice and fast and stays charged for a long time, I would say that it's also a good investment if maybe as a second backup flash, something like that. All right, next question. David asks, has your wife ever booked a client that was initially inquiring with you a week before? I'm sure that she has, and I'm sure that I've booked some that inquired with her. I would say overall though that we're different enough that if somebody comes to my website and they don't connect with me and they connect with her, I think that's awesome. I think that goes kind of the same with anyone locally as well, that if somebody's not your ideal client and they're not like they 100% know that they want to have you. I am okay. There's only, on a usual day or a usual year when weddings are on Saturdays, there's only so many Saturdays in a year, and if a prime Saturday goes to somebody else, hopefully I'll find another client that that is 100% stoked to work with me. But definitely we run different brands, and we both definitely attract a different style of client. So yeah, probably I would say for sure. Sarah asked, what should I watch next on Netflix? What have I watched on Netflix? I don't think it's on Netflix yet, but the Tony Hawk video game documentary, that it's just an interview about that. I found that maybe that's like video game roots, but I found that very enjoyable overall. And I would definitely probably recommend that to anyone if you're interested in the Tony Hawk Pro Skater video games, which is maybe a limited audience, but I feel like it was a bigger audience than I had ever imagined. Michael says, hi Taylor, what export settings do you recommend? What do you do if the couple asks for high resolution photos? I export everything at full res, full size. I guess I probably put it to 80% quality. I feel like I've watched tests in the past where I think 67% quality is kind of like pretty much looks the same as 80, 90, 100% quality, but way smaller file size. You can also run through something like JPEG Mini if you want to keep file sizes down. I would say it's been a long time since I've had anyone ask for higher resolution files, although somebody did comment a couple weeks ago that they were working with a graphic designer, and that graphic designer for some reason wanted like a 75 megabyte like TIFF file or something, and they were like so specific with that. So if somebody asks for something, maybe just upscale it if they already have the max high resolution. It seems silly, but it sometimes satisfies that question and that need. Kevin asks, you seem to always be producing so much content. How do you manage to find the time for that and shoot weddings? I would say that it's been really, I guess, kind of streamlining what I want to be doing versus just kind of streamlining everything that I don't want to be doing out to somebody else. So I really do kind of get to focus on the things that I want to be doing, and primarily that's weddings. Number one, this year has obviously been a bit strange, but primarily regular year I want to be doing weddings. I have a lot of fun going to them and taking photos and then uploading stuff on YouTube for everyone. So I enjoy that. So I just kind of, I don't know, focus a little bit more on that overall until I get thrown into a situation like this year where I really have to kind of refocus my business pretty quickly to generate income as far as like commercial and social media shoots and everything that we will be talking about in September, towards the end of September now though. And then any tips for workflow efficiency beside outsourcing? I would say outsourcing was definitely the number one thing that helped me out. Beyond that, shooting everything as just correct as you possibly can in camera. If you are shooting family sessions or engagement sessions in totally controlled conditions, you can even go to the just shoot JPEG, shoot RAW and JPEG, but editing from the JPEGs only definitely saves you. If I do an engagement session, I can probably both call, edit, and deliver that within a half an hour, no problem. If I edit from JPEG, maybe it takes me 45 minutes if I go back to the RAWs, but that might be another small little efficiency hack, as well as solid state hard drives. Work from solid state hard drives, they're so much faster, and card download time as well. And then maybe even, I guess, one more that I actually miss on my D850 shooting the Canon R6 is that the XQD cards, they load into solid state hard drives so fast back to SD cards, even if they're the 300 megabytes a second SD cards, or I think 270 download, or whatever it might be, write time. One of the write time is a little bit lower than read time, or the other way around. I don't know what it is. Either way, faster cards just download everything faster and get you at least going to sleep after a wedding day a little bit faster. So those would be kind of my brief tips on that. Derek says, can you do a tutorial on how you do the skin touch-up and body slimming through Photoshop? Yes, I'm trying to think if it's already on the site somewhere. It might not be. So I can definitely do one, but it's pretty simple overall. Program's called Portraiture. I just run default settings, and then I go to edit, fade down to 60%, and then I just do image size, 98%, unclick the little lock button for aspect ratio, and then I save it, and then I hit Control, or Apple, or whatever it is, Control W to minimize it, and that's the action that I save, and then I have to go in and open up another image in order to stop the action, and then I delete the last step of me opening up that image. So that's the word walkthrough, but I can definitely show you guys. Chris says, do you think the new Z Series 7200 2.8 is worth getting already? I would say if you already have one of the old ones, and you don't mind using the adapter, or you're not using it all the time, that it probably makes sense to keep your older one. The new one, if you're using it all the time, is great because actually the new one's marginally larger, but with the adapter it becomes a lot larger. And if you're using it for ceremonies only, like I would typically be using a 7200, I would probably just keep the old one. If you find yourself using it most of the day, it might be worth investing in the new one, even though it's like really quite expensive, unfortunately. Barney says, what is your opinion on Magmod modifiers? I would say that they, at least from what I've seen, have been doing the best kind of within the industry for a very long time. I personally don't use a whole lot of off-camera flash modifiers. I very much just kind of use either my flash, bare bulb, or bounced off of something that I can kind of easily control and throw the light where I want it to be. But if you're doing studio work, or if you're doing engagement sessions through the winter or whatever that you need to be in a studio, definitely I would say Magmod would be the people that I would recommend, but that's also based on no real testing. That's just based on what I've seen a bunch of my friends using over time. Caroline says, do you offer the venues or a preferred vendor financial incentives for bookings that you get from referrals? In Canada, we don't really do this anymore, or at least in the Toronto, or at least outside of the Toronto area. There might be some stuff like that going on within the Toronto area. I would say outside, or at least in most of my normal venues, the only time that there is any sort of money being exchanged is a couple companies here, they do a magazine to give to all their couples, and they kind of offset the cost of that magazine plus a little bit onto vendors. So the vendors pay to be involved in that, and then you're a preferred vendor with them, which is the only company that I know that runs their preferred vendor program like a business that is there to generate money for them. Everyone else is just like, hey, we just want to work with people that respect the environment here and will also send us images after. So I would say that's kind of the main thing that most venues are looking for. Kickbacks to other vendors also seem to have disappeared. 10 years ago, that used to be a lot more prominent, that if you're a wedding planner, you send me some business, I send you like $500 or whatever for that referral or a certain percentage of their booking. That seems to have all disappeared, at least in this local area, which is all I can really speak to. If anyone else has any other situations that I should know about, maybe put them in the comments below. I'd like to learn more about that. Justin says, been using more time using live view and histogram to judge exposure, wondering if you prefer to use histogram on new mirrorless bodies. I've pretty much been just running through the EVF, and I haven't been looking too much into the histogram as far as things go. What I have noticed is now shooting through an EVF is that it will kind of, depending on the lighting situation you're in, it does appear to be a little bit different. So I could see that being beneficial, but I haven't yet found myself coming back into editing and really screwing up a file beyond the ability to save it. But my manual settings are definitely a little bit more all over the place, and I would say that it's because of that. But histograms are very, to judge what's going on in the scene, to make sure everybody's looking good, and then also to have an eye on the histogram. And then also the histogram based on the environment. If you're in a forest, that histogram is going to look a lot different than if you're somewhere else. So it's just a lot of variables. I'm more comfortable just focusing on to make sure that what I'm shooting on the screen looks good, and hoping that the detail is there if I clip the whites a little bit or the shadows are a little bit too dark, that I'm able to kind of fix that in post-production. But that's a work in progress for me. I'm new to the professional mirrorless shooting game. John says, what's the breakdown of cost on your end before you price out a wedding for a client, especially current micro weddings? How do you calculate your billables to cover all of your own costs before charging them a fee? So kind of what I mentioned earlier on, that I'm really just after, I guess it also depends on how far you have to go and if there's overnight or if there's multiple days involved or something like that. For a typical micro wedding that's just locally right here, I would say I don't really have any costs with the exception of outsourcing my editing to pick up and go. I know that we have a lot of other costs, but by just shooting one or two additional weddings in a year, I feel like you can kind of just alleviate all of those costs, fortunately. So I don't really have a specific like line by line breakdown of what I need to make on a wedding day. I would say if I'm making anything more than like even $1,500, $2,000 on a local wedding here, a micro wedding, I'm more than happy, and I know that more than covers the costs that I need. I've definitely been through like the calculator trying to figure out like, oh, this is how much I should charge for a wedding package. But the downside with that is that if no one's willing to pay it, then you just don't really make any money at all. And by losing that one single lead by kind of overpricing it, because of data that you have, really kind of just eliminates a lot of profitability in your business. So it's very much a balancing act, I guess, overall. But I would say by just having kind of a base cost that I'm happy with to go out and do, and then supplementing that with other work if I do need to be doing that, basically in order to maintain some sort of kind of baseline monthly income, which is kind of what I'm after more so than a specific individual booking. I feel like it makes it easier on my brain as well to know that like, hey, this is kind of where I need to be every month. And if I see that going a little bit short, that I can quickly kind of figure out something to spike that up. Luca says, what about the 105 instead of an 85 as a portrait lens? Did you try the Sigma 105? Yeah, so I love the 85. I find the 85 is almost too long in most cases as a main lens for a wedding. If you are in a full portrait situation and you have the ability to move around, the 105 is absolutely amazing, especially if you're photographing only one single person on the screen. I think it's definitely a phenomenal choice. In a real life wedding, 105 would be an additional lens in my bag, so I'd have the 85 as a main on my camera. And then I'd have the 105 also, which is just kind of another thing that I don't want to carry around. If I was only doing photography coverage, I could probably replace my 7200 with a 105, and in that case, it might make sense to carry it around. But I would say it's a phenomenal lens, and if you have the space and you're photographing in an environment that allows that, it's awesome. But as a wedding person, I kind of need to do the 85, unfortunately, or even a 50 in some cases. Rob says, how do you get more clients when people are offering to do decent quality work for super cheap? It's really challenging to compete with that. I would say the best way to go about that is kind of almost all of the things that I talk about, specifically in Book More Weddings 2020, maybe. So maybe have a read through that or a listen through that rather. I would say the biggest way that you can do that is by creating a brand and yourself personally as somebody that people specifically want to hire. And if you're able to do that, price is no longer, at least once they're kind of in the ballpark, once they're above those super cheap people, once they're in the ballpark of price with you, they will be a lot more likely to actually book you specifically because they want you. To compete with people that are very, very, very inexpensive, it becomes quite stressful and it's kind of a race to the bottom. And there are a lot of people that are willing to do free work, and that might be something that's necessary in the beginning just to get that portfolio. But once you have that portfolio, I think it's important to get into kind of a price point of other people that are within kind of the same quality as your work. Because once somebody comes into, at least once they get above that, like, oh, I want to spend $50 for a wedding photographer for a day. Once they're into that $1,500, $2,000, $3,000 market, they're not going to be looking at those people that are $50 anymore, but they are going to be comparing with everybody kind of within that ballpark. So I would say focusing on creating great work, not necessarily even in the wedding realm of things, but also just good work that is relatable to other people in your local area that will start conversations and get people interested in your photography is an important thing to do. And then branding as yourself and really creating a good online persona for yourself, I think is key for that. And then over time, it will differentiate you from the other people that are kind of in that I guess the upper group that's not the super cheap people. But to try to compete with super cheap people is very, very difficult, and you're never going to turn that $50 client into somebody that's willing to pay $2,000, $3,000 for a wedding, unfortunately. Josh says, how do you go about getting reviews from your clients after you deliver wedding photos? Through an email, a form, something else? I don't chase people as hard as I probably should for reviews, but I would say as you're delivering the images, when everything is fresh, if you can send a follow-up email the second day, after they get those, to be like, hey, like, so happy you love the photos. If you could leave me a review here when they get back to you saying thanks. I would say that's kind of the optimal time for it. If you send it with the gallery, they're going to get distracted. They're going to look at the photos. But when they send a follow-up saying thanks, that if you're able to respond to that with like a, hey, it would be amazing if you could leave me, and I would say a single call to action if you want a Facebook review or a Google review, to send them directly to the link that will do that. Say that it would really mean a lot and you really appreciate it, and I feel like they're going to be a lot more likely to do it at that point. Rumor says that the 1.2 Z mount lens will be announced very soon. I have a 35 and 85, so I'm very interested in that 50. I'm going to guess it's going to be heavy. It looks very large. So I don't know based on that. I'm sure the images are going to be great. I'm sure like it's going to be amazing, but depending on how heavy it is, if it's heavier than a 70 to 200, I'm not going to buy it. But if it is somewhere in between maybe the 85 to the 70 to 200, if it's somewhere in that ballpark, I think I'll be down with it. But we'll see what that ends up looking like. The super wide's also potentially coming out with like 111 millimeter front filter or something, according to Nikon rumors. So we'll see. Scott says, how do you find the Canon RF 35 versus L series glass? Good enough to invest in, or wait till the L series version? I think it's a pretty good lens. The flare looks a little not good overall, that you don't get that nice flare. You get kind of the weird, like, is this kit lens? But if you're not shooting into the sun, it looks really great all the time. I would say it's an awesome lens to have because it's so small. But if you're really interested in using that as a main lens, potentially on a wedding day, I might wait for the L version of it. I'm overall very happy with it, but could be better. Also, I just updated the firmware on it. I didn't realize that there was a firmware update on it and that you could update your lens firmware. Yeah, sorry, new to the Canon game. So there's new firmware on it now, so I don't know, maybe that helps the focusing, because I had not necessarily focusing issues, but it was always slow and it just wasn't as great as it could have been. So yeah, I would say probably wait if you're not in an immediate rush, but if you want something that's a good all-around 35, that I use it for filming a lot. If you want that, then it might be worth it. Michael says, not really a question, but putting my hand up for a video of your post workflow, please. Yeah, I can definitely do this for kind of, so last week we talked a little bit about photo mechanic, and I can run through kind of a high level how I usually edit a wedding. Or maybe if I have a small wedding, I can just go through the entire thing if the couple wouldn't mind. That definitely is a possibility, so I think that should be good. Next question, not sure if you asked this before. Do you use gimbals when hybrid shooting? I don't use gimbals for anything, and when we do specific video only coverage, we also don't use gimbals unless there's a specific reason. Maybe this also kind of goes with the way that it's our films at least are very candid and documentary in nature, and not so much kind of like a Hollywood feeling production. If you are interested in getting into that Hollywood style production, I would definitely recommend having a gimbal, and the Weebill S is my favorite of them. But again, it's kind of annoying to set up, and it's once it's set up, it's fine, but to use it, there's more room for error, I think, and you really have to be intent. Like, you have to set up a shot, and this is the shot we're going to do. You guys start moving, action begin, which is not something that I love doing. I prefer just to kind of do everything as documentary as possible. So that's why we don't use it, but it's definitely not wrong. And then with the Weebill S, I would say you could probably have some sort of like side holster or something where you can actually like attach it to yourself or just leave it nearby. That wouldn't really make it that intrusive into your wedding coverage. Matthew asks, how would you go about differentiating your business if there's already several other photo, video businesses in your area competing on a similar price point? I offer hybrid photo video work, but I'm wondering if there's something else I could be doing. So the thing that I would personally be doing is probably just creating work outside of wedding work and working with commercial clients that you select that also I guess add something to your brand overall. I would be doing local community work as well to get one out there and to meet new people and to hopefully unlock new commercial inquiries and to new commercial jobs. But also just like by creating this work and hopefully creating work that other people resonate with. I think it is something that's very important. I spoke to this in a video a couple of days ago that usually when couples come in to a wedding meeting, there's always one that like really wants to book you and they always have to convince the other. So by creating stuff to convince that other, I think would be really, really good. And then as far as, I guess if people are just in the same price point as you, that one probably means that you're in the right spot. But then also that you can maybe now be out advertising them a little bit, so you can come up with some advertising content. You can use the Micro Weddings website if you want to put some ad dollars into that. That's part of the course that went up a couple of days ago. And you can be just spending a little bit more money on ads and finding couples that way, hopefully. But I guess like the positive and the negative is that when you're in kind of the same price point as a few other people, that is kind of where the market is. And if they're booking work, they've kind of proven that concept, and they're at least at like they've made the industry worth at least this much, which is kind of good as even though it might seem like a negative. So know that you're in the right spot, and I would say just continue to create work outside of what you're doing right now in the wedding space. Or if you are doing styled shoots or you're setting shoots up and you're working with lots of people, to make sure that you're getting some good behind the scenes of that, so you're able to just really create some great videos to communicate with couples that way, rather than just trying to sell on price or anything like that. All right, next, Chase and or Jess says, what do you put your video settings on when shooting hybrid for a quick switchover? So I'm just running on Nikon, at least it's independent settings, and I would say what copies over? I feel like white balance copies over, but everything else is independent. I'm always just on, and I am aware of whatever the last scene I was in. So if I'm going from outside to inside, when I walk inside, I just quickly make a quick adjustment to both photo and video settings. And then as I walk into the room, I know that I'm at least in the ballpark of both of those. But I always run my f-stop pretty much wide open, and then my shutter speed never lower than 100, and if I need to get lower than 100, I start to dial in ISO at that point. So that's kind of how I would go about it, but just walking into new rooms and making sure that you're in the right space with the settings, so when you do switch over, at least you're maybe a few little dial swipes from where you need to be. Next question. Oh man, to be honest, what light stand do you use? So I really just went on Amazon, and it's the newer NEEWER, and it's just the basic light stand, and they ship next day usually. So that's the one that I use. It's not the best, but it stands the light. And how do you approach small businesses? So I'm going to be doing a full course on this. So in I guess a couple of weeks now, the micro weddings course kind of came out just quickly in front of it because I thought it was more time appropriate. But I will be doing the full breakdown on that and how to attract leads for that. So that is coming. Josh says, if you could change one thing about your business getting off the ground, what would it be? So I guess, released this video as of today. So 3 things that I wish I knew. It's on YouTube right now, and it is a video posted on Thursday. So if you're interested in learning those, that's a full length answer to that. And if you've just been paid $3,000 for a wedding, would you spend it on gear or pour it into advertising? I would make sure that all of my base level needs are covered for probably the next month, or at least my business needs covered for the next month. And at that point, I would consider maybe using a little bit of it for advertising. I would never go full 100%, just like all profits from today go into something, whether that is gear or whether that is advertising. So always trying to keep a good spread of where money is going. Wes says, do you eat pizza while editing your vlogs? I don't, unfortunately. I kind of use both hands. I use my keyboard, and it's a little more challenging than, I'm not, unfortunately, able to eat pizza while editing my vlogs. Veronica says, what do you think about the Panasonic S full frame camera? I think it's really cool. I haven't shot a whole lot of Panasonic. Tim has shot the GH5 and the GH5 S a lot, so I would be interested to see him kind of use it for a wedding day, but I think we will do something whenever I can get my hands on one, because it's a really cool system. It's a really great system even at the GH5 level. That's a micro 4/3, but like the L-mount alliance and everything is making, there's gonna be some cool things, I think. So very, very cool what they're doing, and I think the industry just doesn't really quite know it yet. Massimo says, question based around business analytics. Notice that a lot of your videos seem to have a good grasp on trends. Is this something you keep data on purely by feel? I think it's mostly trial and error. So if I release a blog post or a Facebook post that goes really well and gets a lot of shares, I know that that is something that I should continue talking about, or maybe a way that I can continue to help people. So I would say just by trying lots of things and things that you think would appeal to yourself, again, marketing to yourself as your ideal client, hopefully you can create some stuff that you would find to be helpful. And if you're able to do that, I feel like that's kind of how I do content, really kind of based regardless of where I'm at, if I'm creating for local brides and grooms or if I'm making YouTube content. I'm always thinking about how to kind of be the most helpful within the box of the day, and yeah, so that's kind of how I do it, and I would say that it works 60% of the time, but when it works really well, and you can iterate from there. All right, 2 more questions. David says, notice you have live streaming on your micro price guide. What does your setup look like? It changes based on venue, changes based on if that venue has Wi-Fi or if it has no Wi-Fi but cell service. I would say the easiest way to go about it is iPad and streaming that way. You can also do, I've had the request, I guess most time that I've done it, it's actually been that they wanted it live streamed on their Facebook page, and that I don't think I even charged them the setup fee for it. It was just like, okay, if you have an iPad that's connected to the venue Wi-Fi, like I'll set that up and make sure it's running at the beginning of the ceremony at like no cost to you guys. So I do kind of, it's a pretty different approach depending on which venue. As small as an iPhone, just connected to the cell towers, which I have trust in. A cell phone or an iPad connected to the actual Wi-Fi, which I have minimal trust in. And then if I have someone dedicated there, or at least somebody doing dedicated video, we'll do a little bit something more advanced where we can run from an SLR or a mirrorless camera. I think as of now, everyone has software out that you can actually just connect through USB-C or whatever it might be into your computer and use your camera as a webcam, which is great. You don't have to go through the little HDMI switcher anymore. And you can send that out. It acts exactly like a webcam. If you're using that, it would be because the officiant doesn't have a microphone or something like that, and you want to have a wireless pack on him. So you can be using a camera that has a little wireless, like the Sennheiser wireless pack, or what is it, the Rode Video Mic Go, something like that, very small. And then I'm always running a backup to just capture the HD of that as well, so that they have a version of that. And that could be as simple as a GoPro set to linear mode if the setup is pretty close to them, just to have something to give to them as kind of the HD version of it. Julian asks, last question of the day, how do you light your family formals? Is it always natural light or sometimes fill flash? I would say it has always been natural light within the past long time. It's been a while since I've found myself in a position that I needed to use fill. In most cases, at least the venues that I work at around here, there are options that maybe it's not the most 100% ideal background, but you can get an 80% ideal background with better light, and I'm fine with that. Also, camera technology is pretty great overall, so to get good dynamic range and to have the shadow detail to bring that up in post, even if you're not getting it 100% what you want it in camera, definitely is a lot more possible now than what it was, I guess, in the past. So yeah, I'm pretty much natural light only for really everything. I can bring in flash if I ever need to, but I just find the process of it becomes a little bit more, it becomes a lot more structured, and people are like very much like, okay, we're taking photos now. Whereas just with natural light, I feel like it's a little bit more of a relaxed process overall. So that's, I guess, maybe why I gravitate towards that. If you're at a big wedding and there's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of people all vying for attention, even to just have a fill flash going forward on your camera is set to like minimum is potentially a positive thing, because when you take that photo, they're seeing that like that you're the photographer right now, and you're giving them a little beacon to look towards. So I think that it can be a good tool for getting attention, and also adding a little bit of flash. But I found that if I overdo it, I can quickly see that it's a shot that's been lit by fill flash. And I find that just kind of naturally lit images overall appeal more towards me. But no right or wrong way officially, just efficiency-wise, speed-wise, and experience-wise, I tend to prefer just shooting everything natural, unless I absolutely need to bring in flash. And that kind of goes with receptions and everything as well. That is all for today. If you're interested in submitting a question for next week, you have to be a member of the website, and then there's a Facebook members group that you can go over to and apply to be part of. And all you got to do is put in when you became a member, and I'll check it out and make sure everything is all good. Remember, then when you are, you can ask any questions you want next week. I will see you again next week, and then we're going to be off. This Q&A will not happen the third week of September, but that's all. Other than that, we'll try to keep it going as long as possible. Thanks for being here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next time.